minute. You're not Mel.
I'm a pale replacement for the beloved Mel.
Oh my
The
goodness.
interchangeable white lady.
No. So let me do my spiel because I hope Mel's watching somewhere or listening after she has her lovely dinner. So hi Mel. Welcome to Brave Space Live, a show about anti-oppression, communal healing. Each week we pick a hard-hitting topic. I don't know if today's will be hard-hitting, but and dive right into the awkwardness. And we start off with awkwardness here. We already did. I am Tasha. I'm a trained clinical social worker, an educator, and a diversity, equity, inclusion practitioner. And this is my fantastic, lovely co-host for the day, Rebecca.
Hello, I'm Rebecca. I'm an actress, a director. I'm a perpetual student and an enthusiast for justice.
Oh, I love that. You know what? I would say I'm an enthusiast. I feel like though most of the time justice is just hitting me in the face and I have to do it. So that's what I am. But I
could see how your mood would be dampened by that.
I mean, and I think I was an active, like a justice enthusiast. And then I was like, oh no, I have to do this. I always tell people, and this is not at all a part of what we were supposed to be talking about today. And I will get to that. But I was actually going to be a marriage counselor and a family therapist. Oh, I went to school to be a therapist. So that's why you hear me say I'm a trained clinical social worker, because I was like, oh, I'm going to be a marriage counselor. I'm a family therapist. And I was in grad school and things just kept coming up and things just kept coming up. And I was like, oh, I think I might have to do this work. I think
because it was so obviously not being done. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Like, the need was so real.
Let me say, I do have my alma mater shirt on today. I went to Penn and they have one of the only race and gender sequences for, in social work. But I think when a lot of people find social work, they find their niche and they stick to it, but they're also often forgetting what the other realms are or the people that will intersect with those things. And I kept finding that. So and I was also like one of 5 people of color in my classes. So we kept finding each other. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it was maybe something that helped you survive that. I mean, survive is like such a strong word, but helped you, kind of like make it through that program.
It was a great program, and I'm still friends with a lot of folks there. It propelled me into this work in a way that I didn't think I'd be in it. So here I am. But I love to hear that you are a justice enthusiast. But so let me get into, because we'll just start talking about something else, and I'll just go off for like a whole other half an hour. But so today's topic, we wanted to talk about preference and prejudice and dating.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring, when we were thinking about this and we knew Mel was going to be absent, I think she went to a conference or something and she's visiting family as well. So Mel, hopefully we do you proud. When we started talking about this and your name naturally came up, we're like, we get to sit in for Mel, one of our friends to the show. And your name came up because we both follow you on TikTok. And
that is so genuinely heartwarming.
It is. And it's true. Well, we both do follow you. We love your work. We interact all the time. So, and I wanted to bring in another longtime friend of mine. And we'll laugh at this and you can talk about us after I introduce him. So a friend of mine, JC. So we're both originally from Philadelphia, or he's from close to Philadelphia, but I'm from Philadelphia. And we met when we were working at Whole Foods. We were like very teeny tiny toddler people, or I think I was a little younger than JC, but
we bonded over the curly leafed kale.
We did. And I'm going to post a picture of he and I on our socials after this episode. But JC is a longtime friend of mine, and he is working also in social work. We didn't go to school together, but we both ended up in kind of the same profession. And he works in, let me get this right, he's had over 10 years experience working in integrated medical facility focusing on prevention care, treatment services for people living and affected with HIV, which is such a great industry because there's so much hope. There wasn't a lot of hope, and now there's so much hope in it. So I'm sure he gets to work with a lot of people. So I'm going to introduce our friend JC.
Hello,
Yay!
hello. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I have lots of good memories of us at Whole Foods.
Oh man, it is. It was a place, and we had a lot of fun, and we didn't let anything go to waste there. We used to have like Whole Foods family parties, and I'm still friends with I think everybody on social media, and it's just hilarious.
Yeah, it was a whole different culture, right? Before the Amazon takeover.
Yeah, let's say that we are Whole Foods before Amazon when it was still
Yes.
when you couldn't walk in and just walk out and they charge you for your groceries, but like real Whole Foods, like real Whole Foods. So I wanted to get into this topic of really talking about dating, relationships, and what preference is. So I wanted to start with kind of talking about if how our preferences are developed or how at least we think that they're developed. And I'll give a little story to you all. So when I was younger, I've always liked music, and I think that's how we all shape ourselves. And when I was growing up, the music groups were like, for me as a black girl in a city, was like immature, but I knew that like immature and boys to men, but I was like a little bit younger than the boys to men crowd. And immature was like my sister, who's about 4 years older than me, and I liked like NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, and I'm embarrassed to say it now, but Hanson. And I'm dating myself because I was in the era of music videos when MTV and MTV2 before MTV2 was the box when it was the box, which is a
Oh
whole
my
other.
God. That was
And
a minute ago.
and I'm dating myself. So I remember going into my seventh grade lunchroom and seeing a printout I'm having a vivid memory, so it's like a throwback right now. And seeing a printout of the top 3 videos on the box, and one of them was Hanson and Bop. And I remember seeing this paper. I don't know whose it was because nobody was sitting there because probably nobody wanted to claim it. And I remember going over and picking it up and folding it and put it in my pocket. I mean, JC, I would have dated you because they all had hair like you. And I just remember being like, I like this, but I don't want other people to know because everybody at my school, I grew up in an inner city, so in Philadelphia, so almost all of the people I went to school with were black. And Philadelphia, as a big metropolitan city, still has like I think it's about at the time it was like 58% black, and the other for the rest of the groups of people, white, Latinx, Asian, things like that. But I went to an all black school because I lived in a low income neighborhood, and I liked Hanson, and I liked NSYNC, and I liked Backstreet Boys. And what I was telling Rebecca and JC were before we got on, as I started to talk about the story, was that I knew that it was different, and I think other people knew it was different too, because people would come confess to all the things, all the white things they liked to me. They'd be like, "Oh my God, I like this girl came with me. It's like I like Alanis Morissette," and I was like, "Why are you telling me this?" And then I realized it was because I was the girl who liked those things. So I don't know where that preference came from. I just know that it existed.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you back in Whole Foods. You loved the white guys in the hoodies. You did.
It is true. It is true.
You're a hipster. What can you do?
I know. Well, actually, I wasn't, but I loved that kind of boy. And it's funny because one of my favorite Backstreet Boys he actually just won RuPaul's Secret Celebrity Drag Race. AJ McLean from the Backstreet Boys. I'm sorry, I'm spoiler. I'm sorry, Rebecca. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I tell you, it's okay. No.
So
that's great.
Like, he won, and he's a straight man, but he wanted to do the show. But for me, I'm not really sure where my particular preferences came from. I do know, I will say another thing about myself, and I would love to hear from you all as well, is I grew up with a Caribbean stepmother who worked for a lot of white families when I was younger, around 8 to 10 or 8 to 12. And she would take me with her, and I would go to their houses and be like, "That boy is so cute." I remember this, I'll say his first name, but I won't say his last name. This kid named Brett, and he's probably like 45 now because he was a teenager. And I would go in his room, and I was just like,
"You liked Brett."
And I won't tell him that now. And I'm sure I don't follow him.
You thought he was cute.
And he was a teenage boy who had like, colognes in his room. And of course, I'm sure they did not see us that way because my stepmom was there to clean and I was just tagging along with her. But like, I think that's part of like how my preference was built. Like me being so young, and he also had a room that like everything matched, and his walls were plaid. His family's like really into like decorating. So I don't know. From you all, Rebecca, what do you think in as you think about preference, like who you tended to date and what you?
Oh gosh. Well, I am. Thank you for tossing the ball over to me. As I think back to my kind of like the startings of having preferences, so I was raised in an ultra religious culture. I was raised in Salt Lake City as a Mormon, and so we kind of had. I mean, it's interesting. It didn't feel like an overbearing, high control culture when I was in it. But the more I look back, having some space between, the more I'm like, ooh, yeah. Because, we really were trained to just glom on to a nice, upstanding, righteous man and then be his helpmeet, literally, like make his babies and wash his clothes. And so I don't think that ever really fit me. Like, I think even as a young kid, I was like, I'm not doing that. But some of the preferences for like a clean cut, tall, dark and handsome, kind of that Disney Prince version of what a man is supposed to be. And then I, kind of feel like I never really grew out of that until I intentionally started looking at some of the identity stuff and some of the white supremacy stuff. Because when you're learning white supremacy culture, this is what I tell to other white people. Like, I don't remember learning English. But here we are fluent. So I don't remember learning the tenets of white supremacy, but I've been enacting them for 40 years. So thinking about like, do I really even like what I thought I liked? Do I, and why? And I'll just say one more thing about preference. I think that in white supremacy culture, and I just feel so grateful to be in a space where I can say in white supremacy culture and everybody doesn't go, oh my God. In white supremacy culture, I feel like almost solely the directive is status and hierarchical rank. So I feel like for so many of us, dating is just another lever to pull to get into status and hierarchy and rank. So you're gonna try to pull the richest man or the most beautiful woman, whether you like them or not. And I think so many women get such a name for being like frigid, and women after they get married don't want sex. And it's because women have been choosing partners based on every decision making metric other than is he sexy. So
Right.
Of course you're going to marry a guy you're not really that into, but he looks good on paper, so I'm going to marry him because my life will be have a certain my lifestyle will be a certain thing. I can handle having to sleep with him, which is just like
so sad.
But it kind of is what it is, and we've been making those kinds of decisions for as long as patriarchy has been around, So anyway, I feel like I've been rambling. Well, that's.
Oh, wait, well, I'll say this one thing because I want to hear from JC, like your indoctrination or understanding of preference when you were growing up. I said indoctrination, but that came from the white supremacy culture. But also recently, I just found out that tall, dark, and handsome is means I saw on TikTok said tall, dark, and handsome. It's like, oh, they mean Ben Affleck when people say that, and we are like, oh, we thought you meant like Morris Chestnut or Denzel Washington, but you mean.
I'll be honest with you. I've heard that phrase a million times and never knew what it meant. I assumed it meant.
It's kind of like when white people say olive complected. I'm so confused. I'm like, olives are green and purple and black. What are y'all talking about? And then they're like, oh, undertones. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get that. But like, tall, dark, and handsome is Ben Affleck? Okay. JC, what about you? Where did your preference or your understanding of preference come from any of that?
I think I've always enjoyed people that are different than me. So that's one aspect. And I do remember, I believe it was the first girl that I kissed. We were in preschool, and I grew up in a very like white area, and my school was very white. But she was a beautiful black girl. She had these like great little barrettes. I remember her like I just remember her, right? And at some point though, we kissed, and there was this like a spark. I just like my little 4-year-old self. I remember that, right? But I'm gay, so moving forward, I remember one of my first crushes. He was a brown boy from Puerto Rico. We were in 6th grade, and 6th grade was actually the first time that I really saw this prejudice and racism that was occurring, and he was one of the very few brown people at my school at that point. And I just remember really just he first of all, he was a sweet guy. I definitely had a crush on him. But even then, just thinking about being drawn to people that were different than me, and yeah, I don't know. I have dated a lot of people that are not white, but I also know that I've been offended sometimes when people just automatically assume that I would want to date someone because they were black, because they're like, oh, well, you like black men. I'm like, well, yes, I do. I love men. I love men of all races and sizes and shapes. So I do have to say that yes, I think I am more drawn to BIPOC folks, and I also think that there is a part of me knowing, trying to figure out being gay. I knew that I didn't necessarily have a choice in this. I mean, I know that is for some people, they choose different things. For me, I think I've been gay since I was 5, and I know that being born, I didn't necessarily have a choice in that, and so I connected with people that were experiencing prejudice for just being who they were, and I think I formed some sort of maybe bond of some sort with that aspect. And yeah, and
I think that makes so much sense, though, what you're saying, JC. This thought process of 1, different because you were different, and then 2, different and being yourself. Maybe because when you said it, I'm drawn to BIPOC men, and I was drawn to earlier on. It was definitely I dated all the guys. None of them were boyfriends. I dated all the guys, all the different races, all those different things. But I think just feeling different, being different, and dating different because people being themselves and whatever hardship comes along. So this draw to those things, I think is really interesting as well. I will say, and this is one of our producers says this all the time. She's like, one of my defining characteristic flaws is that I like men, and I also
yes, I know that.
Because it's not fun out here to be trying to date men, but also it's I'm not gonna say that any other group has it easier, but if it was me, easier would be dating a black woman because I'd be like, hey girl, we know, all right, let's do. But I mean, I love my husband. Just dating, and it was hard out here in these dating streets until I met him. It was very easy to like and love him, but relationships are hard all the time. So
Right.
I just think about what it feels like to have this conversation about am I shaped, does white supremacy, as we're all talking about, shape how we think and move and want to date? Because
I don't see how it couldn't.
It's a part of understanding and a part of everything. And I think about that because we're not, and I'll go into our clinical bag, JC, is that you're not born a blank slate, tabula rasa. You're born with a personality, right? You're born with personality traits, and then the world shapes you, right? It's not that people say, is it nature versus nurture? But it's neither, it's both, right? They can't, they work together, and who I am fits into what shapes me in the world. It's not, and it has to be enacted in both ways. And I'll give an example. We talk about, I did developmental psych was my undergrad. So I was very interested in understanding birth to 13 or whatever. My sister and I grew up in the same household. We had one of my older sister. We had the same parents. We are very different people, very, very different people. she grew up in the era of NSYNC and of Immature and things like that. But I grew up in the era of NSYNC, and our realities were a little bit different. We both went to black schools. I ended up being friends with like the one white person at our school. There was like 3 white people who went to my high school, and I was friends with all of them. And then one left, and there was like, so just thinking about who you are and also the environment you are in kind of shapes both of those things, but white supremacy being a part of that. Go ahead, JC.
Well, I think I just remember you even talking about like this idea of having this beautiful blended family, and like you've always been just so like loving and accepting, and it seems natural that you would be bonding with those folks at your school.
It is, and I really think about that because I've done so much work in even deconstructing my own understanding of white supremacy, because it wasn't like dating. At first, it felt safer for me to date like a white guy, and I think as you were talking about, Rebecca, it was this, okay, well, who can I align myself in my preferences with that is going to get me a longer. And I think part of that for me came from seeing white affluence with a stepmother who was cleaning houses, but then also going to college met that really heavily, right? Like when I went to college in social work, most of the people are women. I think it's like 85% of social work is white women. But like but in college, if I was dating people who were college graduates, then my pool of dating black men got smaller, which is so unfortunate. But that is how society is set up. And then 2/3 of, I think the largest number of college graduates at this point are black women.
And postgrad degrees.
Right, and I mean, I know so many black women with degrees. Like it's great, but our dating pool and all of the things that go into race and racism and white supremacy has lessened our dating pool, right? So when we're thinking about people being incarcerated, people being high earners, and then also you get into things like misogyny and all of these different things that go into that. I think it's so interesting to hear about your experience coming out of that. So did you start dating after leaving? Did you like start exploring dating more after leaving the Mormon church, or what does that look like for you?
Not really. I've always been a little bit of a cold fish dating wise. So I did realize that the people that I did, and I have some regrets about some, devastation left in my wake, when I look back, but I think I was looking for like the guy I should date, as opposed to somebody that I really was like genuinely drawn to. But then I don't know that I ever knew what I was genuinely drawn to. And I also, this is a whole can of worms in and of itself. But I think that the training of whiteness is to abandon self in the name of like being good for kind of like, for lack of like more, we're the name of the game is hierarchical advancement and upward mobility and all of that. And so for so many people, and I would include myself, and you know what, I'll just speak for myself, so much of it was about unplugging from empathy, kind of discarding authenticity, and just doing what you're supposed to do to get what you think you're supposed to get. And so when I look back at relationships, I think like I was dating a list of shoulds. And then I started dating a man that I was really into, shit all over the place. And then I started dating a man I was really into, and that was kind of an on again, off again thing. And when I got really into DEI stuff, hold on. I don't know if that messed everything up. I had to dismiss a phone call. I started having a standard for the person that I'm dating to be able to have a conversation about oppression. And so many white men specifically are absolutely allergic to even the concept of white privilege. They're allergic to the idea that they got anything they didn't deserve. Like I had a conversation with this guy I was dating, and he's like, well, my grandma she sacrificed for my family, and I don't see why I should be penalized for other people. You know what I mean? I'm trying to explain the concept of generational wealth to him. And he's like, well, if my ancestors worked harder than other people's ancestors, why are you trying to take my money? I'm just like, I can't, You're
Yeah.
so pretty. But like, where are you? Like, I can't.
And that is a component, I think, for me. The reality of like preference. There is I don't want to necessarily. I'm continuing to evolve and awake and understand white supremacy and my role, and just I don't necessarily want to be doing that with another person in a relationship, or to that level, like having to explain white privilege. And doesn't mean that I don't want to do that work, but in a partnership, that is not necessarily. It doesn't feel like it would turn out too well.
So I
Right.
think
And
about this. So, go ahead, Rebecca.
oh, well, I was just gonna say they're even like the good white guys, right? Like, and I hate to put quotes on that, but like I've talked to like, leftists who say things like, the real problem is class. The real problem is the
Oh, you
class,
being Bernie bro?
class warfare. And I go, it sounds what you're saying to me right now sounds like, forget about the bars and the locks. The real problem is that we're in prison. You know what I mean? Like that's what you sound like to me. Like ignoring all of the structural, ignoring like how we're in prison to say like we're in prison and we should be free. And I'm like, the only reason that we allow that, like there are so many people who would benefit from so many structural changes. And the reason we don't is because we're racist, because we believe in the tenets of white supremacy, because we believe in some little piece of ourselves that real justice means somebody taking something away from me.
It's funny. So I'll speak to that too. In that my husband is a different race than me. He is white, and I was like a baby anti-racist as well, because I know you talk about this and growing in your understanding of anti-racism and justice, but we all, no matter what, and I'm visibly Black, right? But we all have to untangle ourselves from white supremacy, right? Like that's it. It's our own complicated web, individually, communally, culturally, all of these different layers and every layer that it exists, and how Black people untie it for themselves. Because for us, the loss is like, if I don't engage with white, like there is no way that I can not engage with white supremacy. Like there's just no way that I can completely untie myself. So untying myself as much as possible also means I'm not going to move up in a job. Like white people can start doing anti-oppression work as a CEO of a company, but I'm somewhere down here in the call center trying to do that same work, and it looks very different.
And that CEO can clock out anytime they want.
And the real thing about this work is that once you, especially as a person of color, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's for everybody. But for me, it's like sometimes you're like, oh, now I'm noticing life and death. And if I want to even get ahead in this white supremacist system, I have to untie myself from the system, but tie myself to it in a different part of that tree or whatever. Right. So one of the things that came up for me in dating is that when I started dating my now husband, I just wasn't sure. We come from very different worlds, and I'm not going to go into his own personal background, but we came from very different worlds. Like I'm a Black girl from the inner city of Philadelphia. Like, and when I say that, like my dad told me recently, you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth. I was like barely wooden, like barely. So I don't know, but
it was a spork. It was a plastic spork from the local KFC.
And so I'll say I grew up in a neighborhood that is what we would call what they used to call food desert, in that there is no local grocery store. There are lots of corner stores. So there are lots of fast food, lots of liquor stores, lots of churches, right? Like I grew up in that kind of area. Now I will say I grew up on a family oriented block, but we were like, in the summertime, they would drop off school lunches so that the kids in the neighborhood could still eat when they're.
Wow.
So I grew up in that kind of.
So is that like the at need neighborhood? Is that what they call it?
I think it's at risk
or whatever they call it.
So yes, but I grew up in it. But when you're poor, you grow up not knowing that you're poor. Like that's not a thing, because everybody else around you is also poor. So it's just like, this is how everybody else lives, right? But I will say, so when I started dating my husband, I just remember engaging with him and being like, oh, we are from different worlds. And I had white friends from high school because we met when I was around 24, 25. I think I was 24. I don't even know at this point. Oh, 26, I think I was.
So
But
last year.
exactly last year. But when we started dating, I just was like, I'm not sure. And I remember we went on a date, and we were at a sky bar with, it's like in Philly, there's like a fantastic restaurant that has like a 32nd floor with this great view. And I just remember being like, what can you teach me? Like, what are we going to talk about in this relationship when you come from a 2-parent household with parents who are professionals, post-grads. My parents have never, my mom has now graduated with an associate's degree, but neither one of my parents went to college. I went to college. It was different, like those kinds of things. And I remember being like, do you understand racism? Do you understand these things? And he's looking at me like, we're on a date. And I'm looking at him like, and I remember leaving that date. And this is what helped my husband. So I'll say also too, we'll talk about this in a second. I really want to talk about dating apps. I met my husband on a dating app. And what got him the date, this is how race cross-sects everything I do. There was one of his pictures, there was somebody's hand in the picture like this, and I was like, oh, it's a black person. He knows black people. Okay, so because you can't tell, like, if most people they tell you to crop out yourself in a picture, so I'm not looking at your hot friend, I'm looking at you. But it was a black person, and I got to meet this person years later. But
do they know? Do they know they were the ticket?
Oh yeah, I've told them
they were the golden ticket.
He was like, "Thank you, you got me a date with this girl," because she knew it was a black girl as well who works in the Library of London, or she works in London. She's great, fantastic girl. Love her. But it was also, so we went on his date, and I really wasn't sure about him. And it was the day the Trayvon Martin case was decided, whether George Zimmerman was going to be convicted or not. And he wasn't convicted, as we all know. Mm-hmm. And that night, he had sent me a list, an email list from the NAACP to they were trying to promote it as a civil case. And I was like, how the fuck did you get on this list? But I knew at that point that at least if he didn't understand, he had the capacity to learn and the willingness to learn. And that's part of what made me go on another date with him, because I just still wasn't sure. We come from different worlds. How are you going to be able to understand my world? So it wasn't that you have to know, is that you have the wherewithal, the capacity, and the engagement to want to engage with me about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So and we still have these conversations. I will say, and not that dating as a LGBTQIA plus person is easier. If you're going to date a man, you have to commit to teaching somebody about misogyny. If you're going to date a person of a different race, you have to commit to talking to them about race and racism. And what they have to do is be learned, be open, and be willing to learn. And if those are not there, then of course you can't date them. So I can't imagine what it's like dating as a white woman and understanding and engaging yourself in DEI. But I'm dating a white man who is, or not dating, we're married now, but who I still I'm engaged and enthralled with learning and teaching him, but also he can't learn all his learnings from me, and he knows that. And I'm going to keep this one because he's my man. I'm going to stick beside him. And I hear the dating pool out there is ratchet. And as one of our other producers said, there is pee in that dating pool. So y'all can have it.
It's so true. It's sad. It's treacherous.
It is. So I want to talk a little bit about, and I do want to circle back to shame and prejudice, because I really want to hear from one of our producers who put this topic together for us. But I want to go into a little bit of dating apps and if you've done the dating apps, I know I have, and I'll give a little bit, and then I want to hear from you all. My experience in dating apps was it was wretched and horrible, regardless of the race, because men can be. We all date men, so for whatever reason, God afflicted us with this challenge in life to like men. It was weird. It was just, I got fetishized on there, but it was all kinds of yuckiness. But you weed through, because at least I didn't have to meet those people in person. But I want to hear from you all what your engagement and how it has been, if you've done an app, or what that has been like for you, and how you weed out terribleness.
Yeah, well, so I've been in a relationship for 12 years. So some dating apps didn't exist when my partner and I got together. Um, there is some transitioning occurring in my current relationship, and been kind of referring to it as consciously uncoupling. Um, so
Gwyneth Paltrow.
right, exactly. Yes, referring to it as that. So I love this man, and won't go into all this stuff, but we're we're still solid, but just trying to kind of explore a little bit. And I'm 41. I thought maybe I'm the only gay guy that didn't have a grinder, but grinder didn't exist, previously. So I decided I was away. I decided to download, grinder, and it's so interesting. I don't think I'm cut out for it. It is very there is so much like ageism and very much prejudice. People are very particular. That's what I've realized, and very assertive with their likes, their dislikes, and so I appreciate it. Like I appreciate that people are very clear with what they want, what they're going for, and but I don't love it. But I did put out there, like I decided to be a little creative with how I had my like bio, because I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just be me, and I believe that I could meet some like good people. There's a lot of amazing people in our community, so I put on there that I am here. Actually, I'm gonna just pull it up. Let me see if I can find what I.
This will be interesting.
You're gonna pull up your dating app?
Yeah. Well, and also like this is the thing. I'm barely on this. It's just interesting to explore. I'm like, this is an experiment. But I was honest. I said I enjoy getting to know people, building relationships, community, love men of all races. I'm anti-racist, anti-ageism, trauma-informed, harm reductionist, and a fan of kindness. So I don't know why I'm even on Grindr, because people aren't necessarily like looking for love.
Not what you want. People on Grindr is like, set your location to next to me.
Exactly, and I'll see you in 20 minutes. And so, but at the same time, I think I'm just so.
So people don't think I'm being queer phobic. Also, Tinder is like that as well.
Well, yeah, right. And I'm not trying to jump into a relationship. I'm just trying to, if anything, I was away. I was in the Outer Banks, North Carolina. And if anything, I just felt like, oh, wow, yay, there's other gay people here. Didn't need to like really talk to them or meet them, but just the fact that I knew that there was other gay people around, because in that area it was very, I feel pretty isolated sometimes when I was in the Outer Banks. But yeah, so it's been a weird experience. I'm a little late to it, late to the game, and I do see people can block you very easily, or if you're not 19 to 24 or 26 to 38, like people are very particular about stuff. So, but where does that come from, right? Like, why are people so, especially like ages? People have this idea that like, 40 is this, or 20 is this, and there is some truth to that. But I just wonder, what if we gave people a chance, in a sense, and like got to know them? Maybe we would learn things differently. What do you think, Atisha?
I want to hear from Rebecca, and then I'll kind of, one of the things I was going to ask about is this: what happens in dating apps? One for our queer folks, family, and then also the who is desired and not desired based on race in that. But have you had any interesting experiences, great experiences, Rebecca, with dating apps? Are you on them?
I got my last 2 boyfriends from dating apps. And what I like about a dating app is that you really can be as precise as you want to be with who you want to engage with.
True.
So I do, you know, as you're talking, JC, about giving people a chance, we're actually the same age, you and I. And I find myself going through, you know, I'm on like an OkCupid platform and just trying to be, you know, it's so interesting because I do feel like I wasted a lot of time dating people I wasn't attracted to, and that never really worked out. I felt like sometimes I feel like the feminine training of our culture is, it doesn't matter if you are into him, it doesn't matter if you want to touch him, who is he as a person? But then we end up in relationships with men who make our skin crawl, even though they're a great guy. So in some ways I find myself giving myself permission to be shallow, which is kind of like a novel experience for me. But then also, like, as I'm listening to you speak, I'm like, God, is that just the pendulum swinging into a different kind of toxicity? And I really don't know that. And also, I don't know if I'm cut out for dating. I'll be honest with you. Like, I don't know how to maintain myself in a relationship. Like, I drop everything that I like about me and I kind of like meld into who I think he wants. And I do it against my will. I'm like, oh, I have to, you know, caretake him and I have to absorb all of his emotional, you know, so many of the men that I've dated really have so much emotional like regulation training that not only did they not, they were denied. Like, as little kids, we tell these boys like, don't cry, shut, you know, be a man. But when they're 2,
Yes.
and then they come to women my age and they don't know how to be angry. They don't know how to be sad. They don't know how to be lonely. And I feel like women are sometimes expected to absorb and metabolize and then return. How, you know, like, I don't want to be somebody's sponge and I'm busy. I don't want to do, so if I'm going to date somebody, it has to be a better experience than being alone. And I really like being alone.
It's so funny that when you talk about that too, and that exists and I'll say, I won't speak for the entire Black community, but it does exist in our community too. It's a big conversation that's happening with Black women, as you know, we're college educated, post-grad educated, and a lot of the conversation are like, Black women with a lot of education don't know how to be good wives or whatever. And it's like, well, the days of yesteryear was giving hostage situation where I had to do these things.
What do you mean? What do you mean by good wife? Do you mean like, servant?
And I will say, I don't know, and also like, in that men are not conditioned to cry, women are not conditioned to like men who do.
No, right? It's our form of sexism. You know, we say we want an emotional man, and then he gets emotional. You go, ugh, you know what that is? That's sexism. And hey, the call's coming from inside the house. That's sexist.
And I will say, me and my husband do a lot of work on our partnership, and we still sometimes fall back into what you would call a traditional role, but we work at that not being that. So like, we our vows, our conversations are always about not equality, because true equality doesn't really exist. Like, he's good at some things and I'm good at some things, and that has to go back and forth and oscillate between who's good at what. But as we were writing our ketubah, which is a Jewish marriage contract, they like let you choose these different fonts and words that go in it. And we were like, oh no, we're doing partnership, ho. Like, we're doing that. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't even mean to say ho, but it's a thing. And especially not in line with ketubah. But to be honest, like, we had to like fight all of these different thought processes about what it means to be a relationship. Like, I did not have my father walk me down the aisle, and it's not because I don't love him. It is partly because he didn't pay. But still, in general, it's the fact that I did not want a man giving me away.
Right. Because we're not property.
Exactly.
Because we're not property. I was talking to one of my friends. I'm so sorry. This is going to get really heavy for a few seconds. I was talking to one of my friends about dating. And somehow we got onto the subject of assault. Like, women are afraid of being assaulted. Women are afraid of men. We have to act like you are the 1 in 100 that's going to do it, because the 1 in 100 does it over and over and over again. It's not 1 in 4 men assaulting women. It's 1 man in 100 assaulting 25 women, and that's how you get that. And he said, we got into this huge argument because he was framing assault as theft. And I was like, Josh, in order to frame sexual assault as theft, you have to see sex as a commodity.
Women as
Like,
a
if somebody comes up and punches you in the face, what are they stealing from you? It's an act of violence. And he's like, yeah, but it's theft. Like, it's theft. Like, if I came and did a job for you and you didn't pay me, that'd be theft. I'm like, what are you talking about?
To your point, Rebecca, and I'm glad you even it makes me think. It's this conversation I had recently with like my niece. As I don't want to talk about her like sexual business, but I have talked about reframing the thought of virginity overall, because like when when we become sexually active, we talk about losing our virginity. And it's not a loss because I haven't lost anything. But the way I think about it, and what I told my niece was, don't have sex with people you're in love with. Have sex with people who you respect and who respect you. Because I thought I loved a lot of fucking people. And not saying that's not as many people I had sex with, but I really thought that I was in love. But how many of those people I thought respected me and I respected them was a lot less. And it's just this thought of like modification of the black body, of the body of
if you think about virtue, women's virtue is a direct result of accepting the premise that uteruses are male property. It was your dad's property, and then it was your husband's property. Yes. And like it just, and like, how do you go out? How do you date? How do you watch a movie and hold hands with somebody who sees your body as property?
Yeah, no, it doesn't work. So JC, one of the things I wanted to ask you, going a little bit back to dating apps, was, and if you've experienced this or seen this, so I wanted to ask the question about, there's a terminology among LGBTQ men in this whole no fats, no femmes. And you talked a little bit about this, so I want to just hear a little bit more about how what will happen is people will be really specific, and even in that specificity will come like racism, internalized homophobia, and all of the other things. So have you seen that? Have you experienced that? Or do you know about it?
Yeah, and I was talking to another friend of mine, a black dude who's a little bit younger, and we were just talking about kind of his experience, and he was saying, well, you're a 6'2" white guy, so like you're going to have a different experience, obviously, on this dating app. Because I was talking about like, just how like being blocked or just, not everyone's cup of tea. And the nice thing about the community is that you're somebody's cup of tea. Like there's so many people, but people are very particular. But I do think that one nice thing about some apps, like you can't filter out. Like you can't actually, I don't think you can actually say like, because you don't necessarily put your race, actually you could put your race, but I don't know if you can filter out. And I think some apps have done that deliberately so to kind of fight back prejudice and kind of take a stand. But other times you can literally like block everybody that you would not want to see or talk to.
So. I think it's interesting too, because even when we're talking about like no fats, no femmes, mask for mask, all of those kinds of
mask for mask, yeah, I see that a lot too. So
it's this and even when we're thinking about it, even within the LGBTQ community, and something that people don't talk about a lot is this this hate for femininity. Right. Yeah, so and it goes back to hating women in general, and even men dating men, hating women is still a part of it. And it's this thought process that I don't want anybody who acts feminine, because I'm not interested in women, but I don't like women, but I just don't like women overall. But it's still all, circles back up to like male dominated things are important and the other things are not. And it's so interesting because then that, gets at internalized homophobia. Like, how can you be a man who dates men and not and think that femininity is terrible or gross or whatever? And it exists in the lesbian community too. I've heard, I hear people talk about it and still even mimicking heteronormative relationships. This is why straight people are always asking, not the only reason, queerphobia as well, but we'll ask somebody who's the girl in the relationship, who's the guy in the lesbian relationship, and you're like, but we're the same. But it's like, no, but you act like this. And it's just this thought process. The other thing that I was thinking about when it comes to dating apps is my experience, as you talked a little bit about your experience in talking to the black, your friend who's black, is as a black woman, we are technically the least desirable between black women and Asian men, are the least desirable on dating apps. And I have experienced both the fetishism and also like just people not responding at all and it being very, very strange. I mean, I messaged my husband first, but I was so tired of messaging people. And you're like, right, like I met me and my husband will be going on 10 years in a little while. And most of these dating apps like Hinge and Coffee Meets Bagel and all of these things didn't exist. Tinder did. I think Tinder was kind of around, but it was known as the hookup one. It was like, okay, Cupid and Plenty of Fish. It was like, that was it. So just thinking about what it means to be a black woman dating is also a hard place to be able to understand. So I don't know. I know we're running on time, and one of the things I wanted to do was bring in our producer who brought us this topic, Alicia, because we talked a little bit about how shame shapes prejudice, and I really wanted to hear her take on it because I felt like she had such a good understanding and her, you know, what her thought process was around bringing us this episode and talking about it. So I'm going to introduce one of our, I've worked with Alicia. So here's my little bio for Alicia. Alicia is a higher education professional, but she has such a well-rounded background that unless you ask her, you probably wouldn't know about. She like lived in Hawaii. She really loves, I think she worked for Habitat for Humanity. She loves construction. She's like fantastic with organization. And I just can't say enough good things about it. Like I would kiss her face, but that's gross because I used to be her boss. But now she's like my great friend, and I love her so much. So this is me introducing our producer Alicia, and I really want to hear from her how shame shapes prejudice and dating.
Hi everybody. Thanks for having me on. Surprise, I'm here.
So what made you? Question: what made you bring us this episode? And when it comes to like, I really want to hear your take on how you feel shame shapes our prejudice and our preferences.
Yeah.
So first, we'll bring the episode and then shame and prejudice.
Yeah. So what made me think about wanting to do this episode is my personal experience with dating apps and people's preferences. A lot of people, so first I would like to start off with like explaining a little bit about who I am, like my identity. I'm a fat Black woman. I'm a fat light-skinned Black woman. And like you all were saying, oftentimes like fat Black women are like kind of like the lowest rung of the social ladder in terms of desirability. But that might not necessarily be who people are attracted to versus who they want others to know they are attracted to can be two separate things. And so it's been my lived experience with many men have admitted to me, hey, I actually really like you. You are amazing and awesome in all of these ways. And like, I wish that I wasn't so shallow as to not want other people to know how I feel about you, but this is where I'm at. So like, and they would like proposition me at that point because they want all the benefits of like having me around in their life, but maybe not necessarily the burden of having to then explain or challenge others who are like, ew, you know what I mean? So, and then people would use preference as a way to shut down the conversation. It's just my preference, nothing against you. I just prefer this, instead of actually talking about what you're saying is there's some things that you don't like, and you're assuming that I fall in the category of that stuff. You know what I mean? When they don't, the things that they aren't saying. And so I was like, I really want to explore this because a lot of people use, it's my preference to shut down the conversation, but we should talk about it. And specifically for shame, and how shame shapes preference and prejudice. We got a lot of people out here choosing folks like Rebecca had mentioned. We got a lot of women choosing men that they probably wouldn't choose, not because they like them or they want to. It's more for like maybe survival, or like all these people say I should like this person, and even though I don't necessarily like them, I'm gonna try, you know. And
They're
then
tall, dark, and handsome.
yeah,
Or Ben knowing that
and then
Ben Affleck.
and then with men, they're like, okay, I like this girl, but like all my male friends, they're gonna like really like crap on me if they know. So I'm just gonna go with this other person here because it satisfies and it quells like the feelings of the other men that might be around me. Because I don't know, I feel like we're social beings.
It's
so
a
like
play for status. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. And so nobody wants to be that guy. And so I don't know. I always live in that. I have so far have always lived in that space of, yeah, we like you, but I don't want people to know that. And so it's like, let's have this conversation. And so that's why I kind of wanted to do this.
So one of the things that you're saying, like, is really interesting to me too, because as we talk, as you mentioned about who you are, being a light skinned Black woman is some fetish, some often, and this is, you all have to be privy to like Black people having this conversation right now, JC and Rebecca, in that like often what we experience, not saying often, but and not saying every Black man, but like there are gobs and gobs, it feels like, of Black men who want to date a woman who's light skinned because that status is still closer to the whiteness, but don't want to date a woman who's fat or whatever. So I experienced sort of, I mean, I am also an overweight Black woman as well, but in dark skin, like if I had friends I had a friend, one of my best friends is dark skinned, but she's thin, so she was desired. Or I have a friend who's light skinned, who she was desired, and I was at the crux. And then I also really I was like a nerd and loved school. So then it was like, you're too much of a school. I literally had a guy tell me I was too much of a schoolgirl. And I was like, okay, so I fucking read. And that's also, going back to men and controlling and being and commodifying women's bodies, is that you don't want me to be smart or smarter than you. But just the thought process of like being light skinned and being fetishized for that, and being overweight and being shunned and or fetishized for that at the same time, I think is also something interesting that I've had to deal with in a different way, being rejected because I was dark skinned. And I haven't experienced weight in my life where people fetishize me, but I have been turned down for weight. And I had a white guy say to me once, it was a friend, it was somebody I was working with. Even before I started working at Whole Foods, I told them like I liked white guys and I loved NSYNC and Backstreet Boys. And he was like, oh, well, white guys don't really date fat girls. And I was like, and it was like, that was the end of that sentence. And it was a friend of mine's boyfriend. And I was like, okay, not really sure what that means. Did I just like what that even looks like? But when you said it, brought that thought process up for me. So I don't know, like for you, Alicia, like how have you navigated dating, or have you been able to navigate dating?
Oh, what a question. So I tried the dating app thing for a long time. It did not work out for me. And I think that that is largely due to, and I'm gonna bring it up. I don't know if y'all know about it, but like coded bias and like bias and in algorithms and all of that stuff, that has contributed to my horrible experience on dating apps. In addition to people's kind of shallowness, and in addition to like their hidden prejudices in their preferences, and so with that, I feel like it's such a chore to kind of try to muddle through all of the crap folks on these apps to find the quality people. And I just am like, at this very moment, I'm in the mindset of I wash my hands of it. It's too much of a burden than it is a benefit. There's not enough like pleasure in doing it, or the want, it's such a drain. So I'm like, And what you said, Rebecca, was like, or a little bit earlier with if I like being alone right now, and if being with you is better than being alone, then great. But it's not. It hasn't been. You know what I mean? And so, on the one hand, you're like, yeah, I want to be with someone, and society says that we should. Society says that you should be with someone. Like the goal is to have your significant other, that person, and there's a desire and a want for that, and I have that. But at the same time, at what cost? Do I have to sacrifice my want? Do I have to sacrifice, my maybe my dignity, or like my do I have to become a servant? Do I have to like put a damper on my hobbies? Like, for example, like Tyshell says, some things that you might not know about me is I used to be a construction supervisor, and I love building things, and maybe that might not necessarily be the conventional, like when you look at me, I have my nails done and things, but I like building stuff and getting my hands dirty, and I don't want to have to hide those parts about me or make myself smaller for someone to kind of like share that with me. And so I don't know. Right now, I guess the answer to your question is, yeah, I've not had any success yet. But I'd say yes.
It still remains to be seen, right? And I will say, so I know we've come up on time, and there was one other thing we'll talk about. We'll have to talk about it either on our social media or a whole other episode next time. But I want to hear from each of you, like any final thoughts, because I have some thoughts that I wanted to share. Like, dating can be terrible. Being in a relationship can be terrible. Being in America can also be terrible. But I do have some thought process, and it's funny because our other producer, so Rebecca, I do a book club, and one of our other producers asked the question, how do you know when you're in love? And I won't answer it in that way or ask in that way, but I think for me, I'll share some thought process about what it means to be in a relationship, or what you said, and it'll kind of go off of what you all said. But I wanted to hear from Rebecca, JC, and Alicia if you have any like parting thoughts on preference and prejudice as it comes to dating. And not that we were experts at all. We're just all of us sharing our experiences, because none of it clearly is like in a relationship trying to figure it out. In a relationship, still married to a person and who's a man and a white person, so trying to figure it out. Decided to be alone right now until I find. But I wanted to hear. So I'll start with Rebecca, then go to JC, then Alicia. Just your thoughts as we close out.
I think if there's a takeaway for me, kind of, it might be that we put too much pressure on dating. That primary relationship has to be, especially I think if you are a male coded person in our society. I don't know. You see me struggle for words, but like, if you're not allowed to have intimate relationships with other men, and if anytime you get touched, you think, oh, she wants sex, you know what I mean? Like, and we really do hamstring men and boys in this society. And I think any man in America who is a good partner is a miracle, because like the training that they receive socially is just so antiquated and expensive for women to be in relation with. So I don't know. Oh, don't ask me. I don't know anything.
You know a lot, and it's been fantastic. So JC, any thoughts or takeaways?
I think that if you have a strong preference, being able to just explore that more and have conversations like this with friends, and also if dating apps and hookup apps, like if that's not your thing, there are so many ways to meet people, and challenge yourself to like do different things, and join different clubs or whatnot, and no matter how you meet that person, really putting it all out there, and also taking your time. Like, I feel like there's no rush sometimes, and hopefully we all live a very long life, and so we'll be meeting lots of people along the way.
Spoken like a true social worker. Alicia, any takeaways, thoughts?
I do. I have two points that I want to say. The first thing is I would like to clarify what I am not saying, which is I'm not telling people to once you discover that you might not be someone's cup of tea that you were trying to pursue. I'm not saying out here in these streets grilling them like why, like da 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 da. I'm not. I'm not saying that because that can be hella awkward. But what I am saying is that I like JC said, in your circles with your safe people, with your friends, or even with, I don't know, family members, whoever, like start to have these kinds of conversations. And search yourself and analyze why, like each one of you, whoever is listening in on the interwebs here, um, search your reasonings why you prefer things. That's typically, we don't typically do that. My favorite color is purple, and I might say initially, why is that? Because I just love it, you know. But there are reasons why I like purple. Probably because when I was a child, since I can, before I can remember, I was probably watching Barney, you know, very nice, colorful, da da da. And so I just have a, you know, penchant for purple now. But there's probably a reason why. And if we explore our reasonings why we prefer something, and if we see that the reason we prefer something is because we don't want X, chances are there's probably some prejudice in that. And what do I mean by that? If when you think about your preference, you think your first thing you think about is what you don't want. Like when people be like, "Oh, I don't date black women." Like if that's your first thought, chances are you got some prejudice up in there. If you're like, "Oh, I don't date fat women," or "I don't date skinny," you know, or whatever, put in whatever. If that's what you think about when you think about what you prefer, chances are there's a prejudice happening. And ask yourself, what are the assumptions that you are thinking as a result of, like, you know, like I think fat people are lazy, and so I don't want to be with a lazy person, and therefore every person that I see who is fat, I assume that they're, you know, those kinds of things. That's just one example. And kind of, if you find yourself wanting to be with with someone, but you're like afraid that what other people will think, start to challenge, you know, that, you know, start like do something with it. I'm not saying traumatize the people that you want to secretly be with, because that's a whole thing too. Please do not, if you know you're not there at that point, do not traumatize these folks by using them as an experiment. But still, like, start to ask the question, start to see what people around you think and feel, and start to challenge them, you know. And so that's pretty much all I wanted to say.
And honestly, my points come from you all's points as well. I would say when you're thinking about dating, the first person you have to really engage with is yourself. Like, why, who, what are my thoughts about it? If you, like Alicia, where you ended is what I would say. If you don't like fat women, don't date fat women. But you don't have to go around telling people why you don't date fat women. Goes for black women, goes for femmes, goes for anything. If you don't like people with glasses, don't date people with glasses, and then berate them for how they wear glasses. Like, that doesn't make sense. We're not saying that you should change your, I'm not saying you should change your preference, but investigate why they exist. And then the other thing that came to me as both you, as Rebecca and Alicia were talking about significant others in relationships. Your significant other does not have to be a romantic partner. So it can be, you have many significant people, significant partners. I think a relationship is great, but if it diminishes you, it's not a relationship, it's a hostage situation. I will say, as our producer Joe asked on our book club the other day, how do you know when you're in love? Some of the most profound answers, and I'll share a little bit of mine. And Alicia got to go to my wedding, so she got to hear our vows. And one of those things that I said in my vows was that my husband didn't shrink me. He didn't ask me to be anything different. He allowed me to fully be myself, and also understanding and knowing that I wasn't going to be the same for the rest of my life, that I was going to be able to grow into different parts of who I am. And I hope the same and engage with the same for him. But like, I knew that that was a person I was meant to be with, because I didn't feel small. Where I've been in relationships where people are like, Tasha, you talk too much. And like, I do talk a lot, but he never told me it was too much. I do. That's why I got a podcast. That's what I do. I facilitate, right? But he never told me it was too much. He just was like, okay. And I did have another guy say to me, you don't talk too much, you're just talking to the wrong people. But my husband doesn't make me feel small. My husband doesn't make me think about being somebody different, and I don't have to shift and shape to be with a person, because every one of you, and I'm looking at my three co-hosts at this moment, but everyone out there, is that um, a relationship should make you feel full, but you have to be a person. They say, and this is like so cliche, a relationship is the only time that 1 + 1 = 1, right? I said, and I was like, I love you so much. I can't live without you. And I was like, wait a minute, I could live without you. I just don't want to. Right. And he is truly my best friend, but also like I have to be whole, and as much whole as I can be within myself, because I can't put that on someone else. And being in a relationship, like relationships are fucking work. Like it is a ship. It's like a raft and you're trying to build a ship, because I'm not dating me. I'm dating someone else who's a whole person, and accepting them for who they are, and engaging with them, and wanting them to be better, and doing all the things. And relationships are great, but you have to work on you first. And if your preference is to berate someone, be by yourself. Alicia, you beat yourself. Your sound. Yeah. So I just, as you really think about like who you want to be with, or who you want, you have to first think about who you want to be. Because if you feel like you need to shift and shape and change, now you will change. Hopefully it'll be for the better you, but really figuring out who you are. And we know that now, like Tia Mowry is getting divorced after 14 years, and we're all sad out here. But like you really have to figure out what makes sense for your life, and whether you feel like it's a preference or it's a prejudice or whatever it is like really engage with yourself and why you feel the way you do, and what you want and what you need, because that may change. I don't know if that's profound or not. I just know that I want to be in a relationship where I can be me. I don't want to, we do enough covering in all the places that we have to be. Like, I want to come home, fully be myself, fully engage with that person, and be the most authentic version of who I am and who I grow to be in a relationship. And if it doesn't make you feel like that, like you said, Rebecca, like you said, JC, figure out who you are. And really, if it's not better than being alone, then girl, and I say girl as in the perpetual girl for everything, be by yourself. But figure it out. Also, I watch a lot of dating shows, me and my husband, but most of the time we're watching these dating shows like Married at First Sight and Bachelor and Love is Blind. Most of the time we're just telling people to go to fucking therapy. Get you a therapist.
Yes.
Get you a therapist and really figure out what you need as a person wholly. But we'll be here. We could be here for many, many more moons. I just want to say thank you to Rebecca for coming in and being my brave co-host. Well, hopefully Mel will be proud of us that we did everything we were supposed to do to make this an actual episode.
It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting.
Thank you. And if you don't see this episode, it's because I didn't do something right. But hopefully you did. I see there's people watching right now. I can see that. JC, thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Exactly. I just think it's so important. And one of the things I'll say is, I think it's important to make sure I engage people with lived experience and different things. To hear about experience of dating as a Mormon and ex-Mormon, to hear about dating experiences as an LGBTQ person, to hear about dating experiences of a woman who's, as you say, fat, black, and light-skinned is also so important for people to hear what you're authentically bringing to the table. So I just want to thank you. And thank you, Alicia, for putting this together, girl. This was a nice conversation.
You're welcome.
So until next time, you'll see us in 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, because today, actually, I didn't even say this at the beginning because I forgot, is like the 1 year, marks 1 year since we've been doing this podcast in our 2 seasons. And we will be back in 2 weeks to celebrate with Mel. And where we're going next, but we still got a couple more episodes, but just celebrating our 1 year. So I'm glad I got to spend a 1 year anniversary with y'all. So I'm gonna roll that beautiful bean footage.